Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Ways of the World, a brief global history with sources. Today we're going to focus on Chapter 3, State and Empire in Eurasia, North Africa, and we're going to focus on empires and civilizations in collision, the Persians and the Greeks. But I'd like to start off with this image of a terracotta warrior, part of the immense funerary complex of terracotta warriors constructed for the Chinese ruler Qin Shi Huangdi. This crossbow marksman represents the military power that reunited a divided China under the Qin dynasty in 221 BCE. So how do political structures change from the early empires to the classical empires, and what aspects remain the same? That's something that we should look at as we begin this new unit in AP World History. Some of the continuities are centralized governments, use of taxation, strong militaries, uniform legal codes to maintain control, but there are some changes. The empires control larger areas of territory. Rulers show increased toleration toward diverse cultural traditions within their territories, and the rulers create large, elaborate bureaucracies to help maintain that control of those larger territories. All right, so let's start with the Persian Empire. In the mid-6th century BCE, it was the largest and most impressive empire. The Persians were an Indo-European group. Homeland was on the Iranian plateau. The imperial system drew on Mesopotamian prototypes. It was much larger and more splendid than in previous centuries. Cyrus ruled from 557 to 530 BCE, and Darius ruled from 522 to 486 BCE, and they expanded the empire from Egypt to India. It was a diverse empire with a population anywhere from 35 to 50 million people. And there was an elaborate cult of kingship. They ruled by will of the god Ahura Mazda. This was an absolute monarchy. The king had complete and total control, and they were willing to crush rebellious regions or officials and did so accordingly. But they had a strong infrastructure to help hold the empire together. It was a very effective administration system. They had respect for non-Persian cultural traditions. There's a standardized coinage and predictable taxes. There's encouragement of communication and commerce within the empire, and they elaborated an underground irrigation system that sustained agriculture throughout the Middle East and even beyond. And there's an immense wealth and power within the Persian Empire. All right. Excuse me. Okay, let's take a look at the map, the Persian Empire. At its height, the Persian Empire is the largest in the world. It dominated the lands of the first civilizations in the Middle East and was commercially connected to neighboring regions. So let's explain how the location and surrounding geography might have helped and hindered the development of the Persian Empire. Well, the empire stretched across 3 continents, which made control of the empire's subjects rather difficult. The empire had access to several bodies of water, which facilitated transportation and trade. Now, large-scale empires used technologies to help adapt new crops to their environments. An irrigation system first used to help Persia grow cotton. The Ghanat went on to aid in the production of food crops, and states widely adopted water wheels, pumps, and other technologies to maximize their agricultural production. All right, Persepolis. The largest palace in Persepolis, the Persian Empire's ancient capital, was the audience hall. The emperor officially greeted visiting dignitaries at this palace, which was constructed around 500 BCE. And this relief, which shows a lion attacking a bull and Persian guards at attention, adorns a staircase leading up to the audience hall. It's in fantastic condition for its age. Now, using this image, think about how the Persian methods of state building were similar to those in the earlier River Valley civilizations. Well, like the previous civilizations, there's monumental architecture that generally adorned with reliefs depicting the monarch and his power and action. But this is also used by the Persians. And these edifices were meant as much to awe and to impress as to maintain the ruler's authority. All right, the Greeks. Okay, the Greeks are also an Indo-European people. Classical Greece emerged circa 750 BCE and flourished for about 400 years. But there's a distinctive Hellenistic civilization. The population of Greece and the Aegean basin was 2 million to maybe 3 million people. There's a geography of mountains and valleys that encouraged the development of hundreds of city-states and small settlements. And they shared a common language and common gods. Now, between 750 and 500 BCE, they colonized around the Mediterranean basin and the Black Sea. But the most distinctive feature is the popular participation in political life of city-states. There's equality of all citizens before the law. There were active, regular participation in politics by some of the population. The extent of citizenship varied, however, depending on the time period and the city. There were tyrants or dictators that emerged in many areas, and they were supported by the poorer classes against the rich. Now, Sparta gave most political authority to a council of elders, similar to what we'd think of as an oligarchy. Athens was the most distinctive expression of political participation, but there are differences between Athenian and modern democracy. Okay, classical Greece and its colonies. The classical civilization of Greece was centered on a small peninsula of southeastern Europe, but Greek settlers planted elements of that civilization along the coast of the Mediterranean and Black Seas, as I said, that began to colonize. So let's think about some causes and consequences of the pattern of civilization that we see on this Greek colonization map. The cause of such colonization patterns was the geography of the Greek peninsula. It was very rocky and hilly, and that limited the availability of both natural resources and farmland. And the Greek population thus expanded along the coasts and along the sea in search of iron and agricultural opportunities. Now, the consequences of this pattern of colonization was the expansion of Greek language, culture, and building styles throughout the Mediterranean world. Okay, the Greco-Persian Wars. Now, there's a point of collision on Ionia, which is the Greek settlements on the Anatolian seacoast. In 499 BCE, some Ionian Greeks revolted against Persia. They were supported by Athens. Persia responded with expeditions against Greeks in 490 and 480 BCE. The Greeks astonishingly defeated the Persians on land and sea. And many historians believe this is the notion of that beginning east-west divide as a dominant theme in European thought. Greece is more associated with Europe and freedom, and Persia is more associated with Asia and despotism. Now, victory radicalized Athenian democracy more. People received full citizenship. A 50-year golden age of Greek culture began after the Persian Wars. We see the beginnings of imperialism and them beginning to expand. And the Peloponnesian War was from 431 to 404 BCE between Sparta and Athens. Then along comes Alexander the Great. Philip II of Macedon completed his conquest of Greece by 338 BCE. His political unification of Greece was important, and he did this by force. His plan was to create a great Greek expedition against Persia. And his son Alexander, he began his expedition against Persia in 334 to 323 BCE. Excuse me. This created a massive Greek empire that reached from Egypt and Anatolia to Afghanistan and India. He defeated the Persian Empire. That led to the destruction of Persepolis. And Alexander was anointed the pharaoh of Egypt and declared to be son of the gods. However, he died in 323 BCE, and the empire divided into three kingdoms ruled by three of his Macedonian generals. Alexander's conquests were most important in world history for the creation of the Hellenistic era, which is 323 to about 30 BCE. We see the dissemination of Greek culture through much of Asia and Egypt. The role of cities spread that Greek culture. Lots of harbors for 1,200 ships that facilitated long-distance trade. Huge library of 700,000 volumes of manuscripts. And the museum at Alexandria sponsored many scholars. Now, Greek became the language of power and elite culture from the Mediterranean to India. The Indian monarch Ashoka published some of his decrees in Greek. Many Jews were attracted to Greek culture. Pharisees developed their own school system to counter that influence. Now, the Hellenistic cities were much more culturally diverse than the original Greek city-states. They were not independent but part of conquest states. And essentially, the Macedonians and Greeks formed the elite, and the culture interaction and blending, however, were still possible. But Roman rule replaced that of the Greeks in the western part of the Hellenistic world. All right, let's look at Alexander's empire and his successor states. Alexander's conquest, though enormous, did not long remain within a single empire. As I said, his generals divided the land into 3 successor states shortly after his death, and this was the Hellenistic world within which Greek culture spread. So during which stage of Alexander's empire building enterprise did he establish the most new cities? Well, he established most of his new cities after 326 BCE when he founded numerous cities in the Persian heartland. Now, we could compare this map to map 3.2, the previous map, that shows the earlier period of Greek political and cultural expansion. How would you describe the differences between the two processes of expansion? Are they similar in any way? Well, these two colonization periods differed both in means and method, as earlier colonization relied on immigration of people searching for land and occurred largely by sea, while Hellenistic expansion occurred overland through military force. Moreover, initial Greek colonization efforts established coastal footholds in largely depopulated regions in the Mediterranean, while Alexander's conquest defeated established empires in populated places like Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Persia. And the two colonization periods were similar, however, in that they spread Greek culture. And here he is, Alexander the Great. This mosaic of Alexander on horseback comes from the Roman city of Pompeii. It depicts the Battle of Issus in 333 BCE, in which Greek forces, although considerably outnumbered, defeated the Persian army, led personally by Emperor Darius III. So based on this portrait of Alexander and the description of him in Arian, what contributed to the military success of Alexander the Great? Well, both this portrait and Arian's description of Alexander depict him as a brave and fearless warrior, leading at the head of the army and inspiring his men to victory. And that's the conclusion of Empires in Collision, the Persians and the Greeks. I will see you guys next time for Comparing Empires.